Let me start the seminar officially. I'm very happy to introduce Moshe Vardi as our first distinguished lecture speaker this academic year. And I think this is the first one that we're doing over Zoom. Moshe is a university professor and Karen Ostrom George, Distinguished Service Professor of Computational Engineering at Rice University. He also leads the Technology, Culture and Society Initiative at Rice. He was the previous chair of the Department of Computer Science from '94 until 2002, and then led the Ken Kennedy Institute for Information Technology. Prior to joining Rice, he was at IBM Almaden, where he managed the mathematics and related computer science department. His accomplishments and awards are too many to list here, but he has he's a fellow of many organizations and has awards from many others. He also has honorary doctorates from many other universities. He's known for resurrecting CACM and making it what it is today. And I'll hand it over to Moshe. And I have a ton of people who are trying to get in, so I'll deal with that. Moshe, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind introduction. This kind of introduction reminds me of an old story about 3 students from MIT who wrote a paper together. And the first one had a footnote next to his name, and it said at the bottom, AT&T fellow because he received a fellowship from the AT&T Foundation. And the second one had a footnote, and it said Hertz fellow because he received a fellowship from the Hertz Foundation. And the third one had a footnote next to his name, and it says at the bottom, a jolly good fellow. So I want to talk to you today about ethics. But before we talked about ethics, I have to figure out how to flip the slides, and they don't seem to flip. Okay, they do flip. Okay. Yeah. Before we talk about ethics, we're going to talk about trust. So trust, dictionary definition, reliance on integrity, strength, ability, surety of a person or a thing. Sometimes if you go to corporate retreats, they play a game called the trustful game, in which you have to stand on a platform and fall backwards, and you have behind you have a row of your colleagues who are supposed to catch you. But falling backwards for most people is a terrifying experience, and you really, I mean, it's really easy. You really have to, the back part of the brain had to tell the front part, do it, to show that you trust them. Generally, a trust is an act of belief. We don't know for sure, because that's the whole point of falling backward. You don't know that they're going to catch you, but you believe it. So trust is I think, underappreciated part of in societies. Wittgenstein, the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, said every game is an unwritten rule. What is the unwritten rule? Follow the rules of the game. If you write it, you need another rule. It says follow that rule. So usually in game theory, we say the rules of the games are common knowledge among the players, but it's not enough. They need to trust each other that they will follow the rules. Think about it. You go to a traffic light. You have a green light. You drive through. Why? Well, first you trust that the system works and the other direction will have a red light. And you trust that they will stop at the red light. And if you don't, to appreciate how important this trust is, in certain third world countries, traffic lights are viewed as a friendly recommendation, not as a mandatory thing. And then you come to green light, you don't know for sure that the other side will actually stop. And you don't drive through, you slow down to make sure that they do stop. Democracy is another game that to play the rule, you have to trust that the other side will play by the rules. And we are seeing now in the United States what happened when that trust in following the rules start to decline. Trust has incredibly high and underappreciated economic value. Martin Sandbu wrote an article a couple of years ago in the Financial Times. Economists have studied the importance of trust in different economics, and they compare high trust countries, such as Sweden is a high trust country, and Russia is a low trust country, Mexico is a low trust country. And it costs huge amount. I mean, because everything has a friction. If you sign an agreement, do you trust an agreement will happen? And in a high trust country, it does. And so the assumption, the calculation, so the model showed that this is a difference of 70% in income per capita. And this is something also very important in these days. Everybody's talking about the Swedish model of dealing with the pandemic. And people need to understand that certain things that even if it's debatable if it works well in Sweden, but even if it doesn't mean you can translate it to other countries because of the gap in culture. Last year, Satya Nadella said about trust, we cannot afford not to build more trust in technology because our entire economic growth agenda can come to standstill without it. So trust is very, very important part of functioning economy. But there are people who now argue that we are facing a crisis of trust. To trust technology, you have to be familiar with the technology, or maybe the people who develop it, or the company that develop it, or the industry that develop it. But what happens if it's none of the above? The technology is a black box, you don't know the people, they are far removed, and the companies and the industry are not very trustworthy. Think about it, when it comes to cybersecurity, do you trust that the industry can fix it? I don't. I mean, we hear daily about cybersecurity breaches. We now have a report just came out recently from the Republican Senate, basically said American democracy has been hacked. Surveillance is a feature. I would say as a profession, we have not done well to build secure infrastructure. More and more decisions are made by algorithms in a very opaque way. We hear every day about explainable AI. It's a research area. It's a term of aspiration. It's not a reality. It's not as if you have today this automated decision-making system that can really explain their decisions. And I'll come back to that point. Do you trust technology vendors? So I use Twitter. They have a privacy policy. It's unreadable. It's 9,000 words. I mean, it was written by lawyers to be unreadable. Surveillance has become a business model. And one could argue that the CEOs and the tech executives are really kind of hypocrites. Very often, they proudly tell you how they keep technology away from the children at home. So they're building technology for your children, but not for their children. There was an interesting case recently about some fancy neighborhoods in Silicon Valley. They didn't want to see, I see in my neighborhood self-driving cars being tested. And some neighborhoods in Silicon Valley voted to stop. They don't trust this technology. They don't want it in their neighborhood. I mean, it's their technology, for God's sake. They don't want it in their neighborhood. It's okay in our neighborhood. So Mark Benioff said 2 years ago, he's Salesforce CEO, he said there is a crisis of trust concerning data privacy and cybersecurity. But I think it's not just data privacy and cybersecurity. It's more broadly about, do we trust this company to act in the interest of society versus their own narrow interest? And I'll come back to this point later. And that has led over the last few years to a phenomenon that has been called the techlash. And I became aware of this phenomenon when I read a column written by Peggy Noonan in Wall Street Journal in October of 2017. And she tried to explain why people in the United States are so obsessed with guns. And I don't quite buy her explanation, but you should read this paragraph, because all of the personal and financial information got hacked in the latest breach, because our country's real overloads are in Silicon Valley and appear to be moral Martians. She has a way with alliteration, moral Martians who operated on some weird new postmodern ethical wavelengths, and they'll be the one programming the robots that will soon take all of the jobs. So this is Peggy Noonan, Wall Street Journal. Neil Ferguson, a historian from Harvard, I think, also in the Wall Street Journal. Most alarming was the morphing of cyberspace into Siberia, not to mention the cyber caliphates. a dark and lawless realms where malevolent actors ranging from Russian troll to pro-ISIS Twitter users could work with impunity to subvert the institutional foundation of democracy. And if you think it's only the Wall Street Journal, here's Tom Friedman in the New York Times. And finally, there is the internet barons who for too long ignored the weaponization of social media, which is turning our free press into horrors of mirrors, house of mirrors, where citizens can no longer cognitively discern fact from fiction and make informed judgment essential for democracy. Now, just to see that where the techlash is, let me show you a newspaper headline from very recently. Foreign policy, can Silicon Valley save the world? Defeating global poverty is the latest startup trend. Is there really an app for that? 2013. In 2013, Silicon Valley was going to save the world, and now it looks as if Silicon Valley is destroying the world. What happened? And I'm sure that you guys have some new programs in data science. This is now all the rage. Every place now start programs in master program in data science and a minor in data science. Over the last few years, several books depicted the dark side of data science. For example, weapons of math destruction, how big data increases inequality and threatens democracy. A book by very compelling book by Cathy O'Neill. So I want to look at one place where data sciences play a role in automated decision system, and this is the justice system. So in 2017, John G. Roberts, the Chief Justice of the United States, is visiting Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and having a fireside chat with the president, Shirley Ann Jackson. And she asked him, can you foresee a day when smart machines driven with artificial intelligence says, in plural, will assist with courtroom fact-finding or, more controversially even, judicial decision-making? And the Chief Justice answered, it's a day that's here, and it's putting significant strain on how the judiciary goes about doing things. The New York Times describes it succinctly, an algorithm that grants freedom or takes it away. And this is now a booming commercial arena now to deploy machine learning in the justice system. Many applications, there are many decisions that are difficult decisions, bail decision, sentencing, parole, separating children from parents, and judges and social security workers really feel very relieved if they can just delegate it to an algorithm. Why should they have to make tough decisions where the algorithm claims to make better decisions? And you can find website, for example, by this company that makes this one of these products, North Point, and they have a beautiful website talking about advancing justice and embracing community. And who could object to that? But the reality is much darker. Already in 2016, ProPublica, which is a non-for-profit news organization, did an expose and to start talking about bias. And now we all understand the issue of data bias and algorithmic bias. And they show that if you take this program Compass, marketed by North Point, and you just change, you take identical records, but you change it to make the defendant black instead of white, suddenly the system makes different judgments. And we all understand why is that, because we know in the United States, there's no secret that we have deep-rooted historical bias against African Americans, and it's reflected in the data. And therefore, the machine learning will learn from it. It will just make harsher judgments against blacks. It's going to end up biased against blacks. And that led Michelle Alexander to write in the New York Times. She called it the new Jim Crow. A recent criminal justice reform contained the seeds of a fighting system of incarceration. And she writes, this advanced mathematical model appear colorblind on the surface, but they are based on factors that are not only highly correlated with race and class, but also significantly influenced by pervasive bias in the criminal justice system. And it turns out when you take this system and you subject them not just to the there's no regulation there, so anybody can say whatever they want. But if you go and audit them, and this group of researchers were able to do an audit to Compass, and Compass claimed to use sophisticated analysis of 130,000 features. And it turned out that basically you can do a linear classifier based on 2 features and get the same result. And in fact, anybody with common sense would make the same kind of judgment. So it's not as if this system really somehow exhibits some deep wisdom. It just they make it easier for people to avoid making difficult decisions. And just to give an analogy, this is my black lab. And I trained Fluffy to detect risk of recidivism. And Fluffy has been even tested. You take it to a defendant, if the risk of recidivism, Fluffy would bark. If there is no risk, Fluffy would lick. But as you can see, Fluffy is a black box, and it does not really provide good explanations. So should we allow Fluffy to make parole decisions? Now we all understand that this is a joke. Of course, we are not going to allow a dog to make parole decisions. Well, what's the difference between a dog, a sniffing black box, wagging a tail, and an algorithmic black box that does not provide explanation? In fact, we're all familiar with it. Imagine that you guys ask me to write a letter of recommendation, letter of evaluation for someone who's up for tenure. And I would write, I'm a famous computer scientist, I recommend tenure. That's it, 1 line. You're going to throw away the letter. You're going to say, we don't care. We want to hear the explanation. And we will make the judgment based on the explanation. So the fact that the Chief Justice is acting passively about algorithmic decision system, the Chief Justice of the United States is the chief regulator of the federal court system. They can write rules that require at the minimum auditing of such software, and they have not done so. There is a novel that I read in the mid-80s. My son was a teenager, and I found it difficult to talk to him, so I decided I will read his books, so we'll have something to talk about. And he was mostly reading science fiction. I said, okay, I'll read his books, and I read Ender's Game. And this has been a fairly popular book, especially in computer science. This is spoiler alert. If you haven't read it, now plug your ears, because I'm going to now ruin it for you. Ender thinks he's playing a video game. But what he does not know that he and his friends are really fighting an intergalactic war. And when they win the game, they actually win the war, and they destroy a whole civilization. I think these are Ender's Game moments. I think many people in computer science and come to computer science because programming is like a game. It's a fun game. It's like a big puzzle. We like puzzles. It's us against the machine. But we are running the world now. We are like Ender that when he discovered the end of the novel, oh my God, I've destroyed the civilization. This is our Ender's Game moment. And the question is, how will we respond to this moment? And it's typically being understood as an ethics crisis. So here is a whole bunch of titles from newspaper. Text, ethical dark side, ethics crisis. We need chief ethics officer. And his Facebook company is so ethical that it give an Institute of Ethics in AI in, I think, in Techno University of Munich, $7.5 million to prove that they are really very, very ethical and they really care about ethics. In 2018, there was a meeting of the Computer Research Association, and we had a panel on social security, or social responsibility, excuse me. And the panel was presented with these 3 questions. We live now in the world that we have created, we computing professionals. We can no longer pretend we are making the world a better place. We have seen the dark side of computing. And the question really was, what is our social responsibility as computing professionals? And all the panelists said, ethics, ethics, ethics. And I want to be the ethics party pooper. I'll explain. It's not that I don't think ethics is important. I think ethics is very important. I don't think it's really an ethical crisis. I think there is a phrase that has been also coined, ethics washing. I think it's convenient to say it's about ethics. I don't think it's about ethics. So let me make an analogy to transportation. 1908, the Ford Model T rolls off the manufacturing line, becomes the first mass-produced, mass-consumed automobile. And automobiles are incredibly convenient. When I used to go to work, something I have vague memories of going to work. I used to drive to work. It's just very convenient. But we discovered very early on that automobiles kills people. So for the last 110 years, we have been trying to make vehicles less dangerous. And there are different ways you can measure it. I mean, of course, that the population grows, so there are more people, there are more vehicles, so more people die. So transportation experts focus on one important measure, which is the red line, and this is death per billion VMT. VMT is vehicles mile traveled. So you ask yourself, how many people die when you drive billion miles, okay? Or if you want, you know, maybe 10 million people ride, or 100,000, 100 million people drive 10,000 miles per year. And you can see that in the early 20s, it was very high. And we have been able to reduce it order of magnitude practically. It is now below 10. I think there's a little spike recently because of texting, driving while texting. But generally, we've done a very good job at making automobiles safer. How did we do it? Partly by features of the cars. Avoid crashes, mirrors, anti-lock brakes, airbags. We've changed the system. You know, we put crosswalks and traffic lights, and we pass law. For example, Texas has finally passed a law a couple of years ago. The driving while texting is illegal. Until then, it was legal. So we did many measures to make automobiles safer. Many of them driven by, you know, was driven by, for example, airbags was a huge fight. The government wanted airbags, the industry resisted. Eventually, the industry relented. What we didn't do, we didn't say, let's take every driver and give them ethics training. That was not the solution. What was the solution? The solution was public policy. Public policy, I take it as a broad term because it includes laws. It includes deciding how to build our cities. It includes regulation for safety requirements from car manufacturers. It's a whole combination of different measures that I put under the rubric public policy, but it was not about ethics. So now let's go back to our world, the internet, the thing that we have our kind of biggest contribution to society over the last 30 years, the internet. Now, the roots of the internet kind of go back to pre-internet days. So I came to Stanford as a postdoc in 1981. And there was no internet per se there, but there was the well, which was the social media of the time. It was the dial-up bulletin board. There was Usenet, Unix to Unix network, in which people ran all kinds of discussions. And the culture very much was influenced by what happened in the Bay Area in the 60s, which the 60s really happened in the early 70s. And it was the hippie movement. It was very anti-government because the government ran the Vietnam War. And one mantra that came out of these hippie days was information wants to be free. Information should be free. Now, of course, information doesn't want anything. But this caught on. And when Tim Berners-Lee started in 1989, the World Wide Web, he bought into this mentality, which is the goal is to have unfettered public sharing of information. And very quickly, people discovered there is a problem with this unfettered public sharing of information. There's too much information out there. How do you find anything? So the first attempt was, how do you find things in the library? You have a catalog. Let's have a catalog for the internet. This is what Yahoo tried to do, to have a catalog for the internet. Of course, we now understand it didn't scale. It didn't have a chance. So people came up with another idea, and they had search engines, Alta Vista, Lycos. They stunk. I mean, you have to go page after page after page to find something that was useful. And then Google came with a fantastic search engine. Usually the thing that you want is way at the top When you do a Google search, do you ever look at page 2? The answer is almost at the top of page 1. Now, Google brought into this mentality, information wants to be free. So they had a challenge, how to monetize their search engine. And they didn't want to charge money for it. And they said they had a brilliant idea, which was advertising, which is what the news media is doing. Newspaper, we pay subscription, but it's very minimal. TV, we pay now for cable, but not for broadcast TV. They say, let's use advertising. It turned out that online advertising was very ineffective. Newspapers, you basically use real estate to capture the attention of the readers, and it doesn't bug people if there is a full page advertisement. They just skip it if they're not interested. But big banners on the web prove very, very unpopular. So how do you capture the attention? It's more difficult. So the solution was another great business idea, micro-targeted advertising. When I open a web page, I see advertisement. It's different than what you see because Google matches the advertisement to what they think I would be interested in. For this, they need to know more about me. They need more and more personal data. Now, we all realize that they follow everything we do on the web. What you don't realize, they buy lots of data in the real world. It's not just about the web. They collect tons of data about you because they need to know who are you and what is it that you would care about. So they go to MasterCard and say, we want to know everything that Vardi buys, online and offline, because we need to know what is Vardi interested in. So this business model has been called surveillance capitalism. And basically we have the people, the watchers, the two classes now, the watchers and the watched. These companies are black boxes. We don't know what's happening inside these companies, but they know all about us. And the kind of pithy summary of this is, if you're not paying for it, you are the product. We are not the consumers of Google. We are users. We're not consumers. The consumers are the advertising companies. Now, how well has it worked for Google? Very well. Thank you very much. This is Google's advertising revenue from 2001. And last year, it was close to $135 billion. So let's imagine that I've been able to convince Larry Page and Sergey Brin that they're ethically challenged. And we'll take them to some kind of ethics boot camp. Do we think that they're going to come back to Google and say, you know what, we realize that what we're doing is unethical. Let's ditch this advertising business model. What? $135 billion. They're not going to ditch it. And it's not clear that we should ask them to ditch it. I wrote almost 2 years ago, if society finds the surveillance business model offensive, then the remedy is public policy in the form of laws and regulation rather than ethics outrage. We should not ask corporations to curtail legal business practices because we don't like them. And we'll come back to this point. What should we expect corporations to do and not to do? Now, many people say, but this is, I love Google. I get all these free services. Really? Do you think they're free? Where does the $100 million, over $100 billion comes from? And the answer is, well, it's from advertising. So who pays? The advertisers. Where do the advertisers get the money? They just pass it, they pass it on to you. We are paying for this. The money comes from us. It's for companies, it's the cost of doing business. What they charge us include their expenses on advertising. We pay them. So effectively, Google has an invisible tax on the economy, and we are paying for it, but it's completely opaque. So we have an opaque tax, and we are all being surveilled by Google and by Facebook and other companies. Now, again, some people say, yes, people are willingly giving their information in exchange for free services. Well, you are not the typical users of Google. Most a user in Facebook. So Facebook, for example, has a profile on you. And if you click, dig enough somewhere on your Facebook page, you'll find somewhere of your advertisement preference, and you will find that Google has a very deep profile of you. And it turned out the vast majority of people have no idea that this, I'm also not Google, Facebook. Most people do not know. When you show them, they're very uncomfortable with it. And in fact, many of them disagree with how Facebook characterizes them. So I think of myself as a centrist politically. Facebook says extremely liberal. I don't even know who is right. Is it Facebook or me? Who is right about how my political stance? Almost all of us are using Gmail in one way or another. How many people have read the terms of services? I urge you to read it. You'll be horrified to know what you have agreed on when you use Gmail. I only happened to read it because I was involved when Rice negotiated an educational license for the graduate students. So I'm sorry, the undergraduate students, our mail provider is now Google. Even if you send an email to someone at Rice.edu, it is channeled via Google. So I had to read their term of service for general public and for education. And the education license is better, but the general license, you'll have to read it to realize what kind of rights they're claiming. Every time you send a paper over Gmail, you're giving Google some rights to it. But it also meant that we have decided when it comes to information, there's no marketplace. There's no value for information because it is free. Now, we may not always like the market, but markets provide us a very, very good mechanism to find the value of things, okay? What is the value of this laptop? The value of this laptop is not however much it costs to Lenovo to make it plus, I don't know, profit of 10%. It's however much people are willing to pay for it. That's how you determine value of things. And if we've destroyed the market, that means we don't have any value for information. And that have all kind of negative effects, for example, all kind of businesses, we are destroying the news media because nobody is willing to pay for information. And I wrote a column of this a couple of years ago, how the hippie destroyed the internet, making many, many people very, very mad at me. I'm not sure why. So again, I want to ask you, is it about ethics or is it about public policy? Let's take another example. We all agree to various licenses. Every time you use a product, computing product, you agree to a license. You don't read it usually. So I open one of these licenses. This is by corporation XXX. And here's what it says. To the extent not prohibited by applicable law, in no event shall XXX be liable for personal injury or any incidental, special, indirect, or consequential damage whatsoever, and so on and so forth. So disclaimer of liability is completely standard in the computing industry. We are all used to it. You click, click, click. Yeah, they're not responsible. They're not responsible for anything. Even now, when more and more things depend on computing, they're not responsible for anything. Now let's contrast it with the concept of strict liability. What is strict liability? If you buy a car and let's say the tire explodes, and because of the tire explosion, you had an accident, the tire manufacturer is liable unless you did something to damage that tire. If you did not do anything, if you complied with the manufacturer's directions, they are liable. Now, there are degrees of liability, and the degrees of liability would depend on how negligent they are. But even if they're not negligent, the fact that they produce a tire that failed, they're responsible. And this is a long history it's based on common law. And the history was that it used to be that the legal doctrine used to be caveat emptor, buyer beware. If you buy a car, you buy a tire, you should make sure that the tire is safe. And gradually the courts and legislatures have understood that we don't have the means today. Technology is too sophisticated. There's no way for me to buy a tire and figure out whether it is safe or not. So we went from caveat emptor to strict liability. Now, strict liability has a very, very old history. How old is the history? About 4,000 years. It goes back to the laws of Hammurabi. You want to know how strict were you go to the Babylonian? If a builder has built a house for a man and has not made his work sound, and the house which he has built has fallen down, and so cause the death of the householder, that builder shall be put to death. This is really, really strict liability, right? An eye for an eye. So this was the idea. Again, the person who buys the house cannot check whether the house is sound. It's up to the builder to ensure the house is sound, and the builder is strictly liable. But somehow computing carved an exception for itself. And I'm not the first one to point this out. This has been pointed out 25 years ago by Helen Nissenbaum, a philosopher of technology, and she wrote an article on accountability in computerized society. And she said this is as a warrant of eroding accountability in computerized societies. It argues that assumptions about computing and feature of situation in which computers are produced create barrier to accountability. And she tried to come up with what are the remedies for this. But again, is it the problem is that XXX Corporation is unethical? No, it's an issue of public policy. If we want computer product, computer manufacturers and software and hardware to be strictly liable, it's up to the law to make them liable. It shouldn't be an issue of ethics. Now, why is there so little IT public policy? Well, the IT industry has fought it for years. This is not new. This is not just the latest round. This goes back to this for a long time. And today we have a high-tech industry that is approaching $7 trillion, excuse me, in market capitalization. And they've always argued regulation stifles innovation. And they support think tanks that will come up with all kinds of studies that will say regulation stifles innovation. So 2 years ago, Elon Musk has issued some tweets that the SEC argued were meant to manipulate the stock price. And the SEC started, Security and Exchange Commission started an investigation about Elon Musk. And Wired Magazine immediately jumped in. The case against Elon Musk will chill innovation. So for God's sake, don't investigate people for security violations because it will chill innovation. And partly behind this, there is this techno-utopian culture that we must recognize that is part of our computing ecosystem. So let me quote John Perry Barlow that passed away a couple of years ago. And he was one of the founders or co-founders of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And they issue a document, Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace, which I would encourage you, you can just go and search for it on the web and find it. Here's how it starts. Governments of the industrial world, you weary giants of flesh and steel, I come from cyberspace, the new home of the mind. On behalf of the future, I ask you of the past to leave us alone. Leave us alone. As if what happened in cyberspace stays in cyberspace. But we all understand how naive that was. You go back and you read it. This sounds incredibly naive today. We know that today you can attack the US power grid from cyberspace. Okay, there has been some evidence of Russia penetrating some small some small player in the power industry. You know, do we have any doubt anymore that Russia has interfered in the US election system? And again, manipulating through technology, manipulating social media. And another part of our culture is the disruption culture. And the disruption terminology goes back to a very influential article by Clayton Christensen, who just passed away very recently. And it was about disruptive innovation. Ultimately, the book became known The Innovator's Dilemma. But that was 1996. There was a previous article, Disruptive Innovation. And it described how in the technology industry, we have this paradigm change every few years. For example, he looked at disk drive technology, and you may not remember, but this is how disk drive used to look. And he shows that every generation, new generation of technology, a new player, a new entrant to the market came with new technology and disrupted the previous one. Now, Christensen was being descriptive when he said it. He said, this is how this industry is apparently working. But these people took that descriptive noun and they made it into prescriptive. We should disrupt. Every business plan I start, we should disrupt. As if disruption is a positive thing. So that attitude that disruption is positive leads to Facebook motto in the early years: move fast and break things. Unless you are breaking stuff, you're not moving fast enough. Now, the question, what are you breaking? Are you breaking your travel expense account mechanism? Or are you breaking society? We now know that Facebook frictionless sharing enabled massive dissemination of fake news. And we also know that this has had decisive impact on the US 2016 presidential election. And there is a very good book by Kathleen Jamison in 2018 that basically describes how it all happened. And since then, we had the Mueller report, the Republican Senate just came up with a study. This has been amply documented. So Facebook came up with this attitude, move fast and break things, and it ended up maybe breaking American society. Not to mention a whole other thing like genocide in Myanmar and all kind of other effects. And I want to bring a third example, which I call criminality as a business model. So we have the sharing economy. The sharing economy is based, not all of it, but the sharing economy in particular, ride sharing and residence sharing, is based on law breaking. Because, for example, take if I just want to start driving people for money, I decided that I'm tired of my job as a professor. I don't want to go work for Uber. I will drive people for money. I'm not allowed to do that. I need a taxi driver. I need a taxi license to do it. I need a medallion to do it. If I want to start, I said, you know, I have my wife and I are empty nester. We have room in the house. We're going to start renting it on a daily basis. We're going to turn one room and we're going to start turning it a house in a hotel. I'm not allowed to. There are zoning laws. I'm not allowed to do it here I live in a small town inside Houston. I'm not allowed to do that. Now, so both Uber and Airbnb really facilitate law breaking. They don't break the law directly. It's the people who drive break the law. The people who maybe are renting rooms are breaking the law. But imagine we had a company, and it will be called Easy Grass. And it will be for the illegal drug delivery of illegal drugs, an app. And they would say, we don't deliver the drugs. The person who delivers drugs, they maybe do something illegal. We're just matching users and sellers and buyers. We all would say, wait a minute, this is like the pimp saying, you know, I'm not breaking the law. I'm just a middleman. These guys are the middlemen for illegal transactions. And somehow, as a society, instead of saying this is not acceptable, we are going to allow them to go and do IPOs for tens of billions of dollars. And much of it goes back to the concept of corporate responsibility. So in the 1960s, there was a concept of corporate social responsibility. And if you ask in 1960 CEO, whom are you responsible for? They will tell you it's complicated. I have many stakeholders. I have shareholders, I have customers, I have employees, I'm situated in a community. I have to balance the interests of all of them. And they understood, the CEO of 1960 understood that it would mean that sometimes you sacrifice profit for social goals. But then in the 1980s, shareholder value became the dominant dogma in the business community. And this is partly based on a very influential article that was written 50 years ago by Milton Friedman, in which he argued the social responsibility of business is to increase its profits. That's it. It's just about profits. You're not responsible for anyone else. Even the business community last year decided it's time to back out. The Business Roundtable, who is very influential, it's a group of like the top 200 CEOs, came back with a statement. We need to go back to stakeholder capitalism. And the issue is technology is driving the future, but who is doing the steering? And the reality is that in many, many aspects of our lives now, tech corporations are doing the steering. They decide what's going on. And there was an attempt, actually, this article was written about the Google attempt to build a smart city in Toronto. And Bloomberg, Mariette Schake wrote in Bloomberg, beware of tech companies playing governments. I think recently, Google kind of backpedal on that project. The point is technology has been moving in the last 50 years very, very fast. And public policy had moved very, very slowly. But we must understand innovation is not the goal. Innovation is means for societal progress. And we have to make sure that it does serve societal progress. Excuse me. Stifle innovation is okay if it leads to better societal progress. The New York Times just had an issue, special issue, commemorating the Milton Friedman article. And there is an article, and there was a title, 50 article, 50 years of blaming Milton Friedman. And Benjamin Applebaum wrote as follows. He said, we've been fighting cooperation for the last 50 years now over this. He said, it's the wrong battle. It's not about the role of the corporation. It should be about the role of the state. Why? He said, government remains the most powerful means to express our collective will. The necessary solution to create strong incentive for good behavior and laws against bad behavior. If we want corporations to behave better, we shouldn't go tell them, please be ethical, pretty please behave better, please behave better. Corporations are not natural entity. They're creations, but the government created the legal framework for corporations to operate. And it's up to us to give them the incentive and the barriers against, or incentive for good behavior and barriers and penalties for bad behavior. It shouldn't be up to corporation, it should be up to society. And the way society does is via governments. Now let's go back to ethics a little bit, because it sounds like I say ethics is not important. Of course, ethics is important. I'm very, very pleased to have introduced at RISE a new course on computing ethics and society, where we put social justice at the center of this issue. Chief Justice Earl Warren said, in civilized life, the law floats in a sea of ethics. You cannot have public policy if you're not basing it on, a good public policy, if you're not basing it on ethics. But you have to be very careful what is public policy and what do you leave to individual ethics. For example, take prohibition. We decided that alcohol consumption is bad. Well, I don't drink any alcohol, so I agreed alcohol consumption is bad. But prohibition was a colossal failure. So we decided at the end we're going to leave this decision. We have some laws against drunk driving, for example, but generally speaking, we decided to back off from prohibition. We had a drug war. And again, some people argue it's a colossal failure. And we are trying to find what's the fine line. What do we leave within the public realm? What do we leave to individual decision making? So this is the essence of the dichotomy here. Ethics is about individual responsibility. Public policy is about societal responsibility. But ethics is, you decide individually how to behave. And there are no institutions that enforce it, unlike the law, which is institutionalized. Of course, there are some professions where ethics has the power of law. If you are a lawyer, then yes, you can be disbarred for ethical violation. And so they have defined a code of ethics that have the power of law. That means they've institutionalized ethics. But talking about ethics without creating the institutions around it, it's just asking corporation, pretty please behave nicely. I think this is going to change. If you just look at here are just titles from newspapers, okay, from last year. And you have Tim Cook, who is the CEO of Apple, who said, we all deserve control over our digital lives. That's why we must rein in the data brokers, okay? Alphabet CEO backs temporary ban on facial recognition tech. Mark Zuckerberg, this year. The internet is new last year. The internet is new rules. Let's start in these 4 areas: hateful content, elections, privacy, and data portability. So clearly regulation is coming. But regulation is hard. Good regulation is hard. And good regulation requires, first of all, good governance. If you live in a corrupt country, regulation is just invitation to bribes. So first we need good governance. And in the US, we seem to be going backwards rather than forward in terms of good governance. And there are different approaches. US is very technology focused. Europe usually focuses on societal impact. Clearly, we need some international treaties because technology cross international barrier. And the number one regulation question is big tech too big? And there are now more and more people arguing that big tech is too big. The companies are too big. They have become monopolies. There's some difficult questions, but I think there are some easy questions. Should Facebook be forced to spin off Instagram and WhatsApp? My answer is they should have never been allowed to buy them. They should be forced to spin them off. Should Google be forced to spin off YouTube? My answer is absolutely. It's too big and too powerful. YouTube can survive on its own. Just a reflection of what's happening now with the pandemic. The pandemic is only strengthening technology. We all now live and die by technology. Washington Post from April. Tech titans spent much of the last year playing defense, but the global pandemic has given Silicon Valley once in a lifetime opportunity to expand their power, crush rivals, and change their political fortune. In particular, many startups have not been able to cope well with the economic downturn. And there is a big fear that when all of this, when the dust settles, the big players may be the only one left behind. People always say, okay, what is your solution? Give us the solution. And answer, these are all difficult questions. You know, what to do about Facebook, for example. It's a very difficult question because it's about free speech and bigness. It's all messed up, and we need some very smart people who know more than me about regulation, thinking very hard about it. But there are some easy things that to me that easy to do, and I don't know why we're not doing them. For example, if you buy in the United States a mutual fund, you get a prospectus. The prospectus will have a paragraph explain what is it you're investing in plain language. And there is this is called Security Act Rule 429D. There has to be a simple language explanation. We all sign lots of licenses and terms of agreements. Why not have a paragraph in simple language? For example, we all use many of us use the Creative Commons licenses. I bet you've never read the full license, but Creative Commons give you the legal license and a simple language paragraph. I don't see why you're not requiring every license to come up with a simple plain language paragraph to explain to us what are the main things when I'm agreeing to use Twitter, what am I agreeing to? We are deploying automated decision-making. Let's regulate them. Let's find some rules about them. Let's not make it's a jungle out there. And CSCM had an editorial about 2 years ago about how to regulate automated decision-making. But it has to become a policy. When Yahoo was bought by AT&T, they told us that about a year earlier, they got hacked and data of billion users was leaked. And they only had to disclose it when they were being bought by AT&T. Before they did not have to disclose it. I don't see, again, we should require them to disclose it much faster. And part of the problem with many of the services of internet companies is the advertising-based model. Let's require them to provide an ad-free subscription option. We'll see how much are people willing to pay for if you can use Facebook with no surveillance. Let's see what happens. But again, we've destroyed the market and information, so we don't know the value of information. I want to step back and kind of look at the history of our field. Our patron saint, we can think of it as Leibniz, who were thinking about computing, of course, in the very early days. You know, he built calculators, so he knew a little bit about it. And he wrote, why did he want to build this calculus ratiocinator, a reasoning calculator? Mankind will then possess a new instrument that will enhance the capabilities of the mind to a far greater extent than optical instruments strengthen the eyes. The goal was to enhance the mind. Does Facebook enhance the mind? Yes and no, yes and no. I have a very mixed feeling about Facebook. Ada Lovelace, when she worked with Charles Babbage was an entrepreneur. He wanted to make money off the analytic engine. And she said, well, it's okay with me if you want to make money, but she wrote to him in a letter, I wish to add my mind towards expounding, interpreting the Almighty and his laws and works for the most effective use of mankind. She said, ultimately, she wanted to do it for the benefit of humanity. And we need to remember that. It's okay to a business to be profitable. But us as computer professionals, we need to think, ultimately, we should do what we do for the most effective use of mankind. And zooming out in a big way, it's not just about computing, but technology in general. So technology is what defines humanity. I think the things that define humanity are language and technology. And for the Greeks, the most fundamental technology, in classical Greek, the most fundamental technology was fire. And fire was such a miraculous thing that Prometheus supposedly took it from the gods, stole it from the gods and gave it to humans. And he was eternally punished by the gods. An eagle comes every day and eats his liver. And then the liver regrows and it gets eaten again and again and again. But this was Prometheus' punishment. Only recently I learned about the punishment to humanity. And this is the story of Pandora's box. The gods sent Pandora with a box, supposedly containing gifts. And when the box is open, then all kind of diseases and pestilence and famine and wars, all the ills, societal ill comes out of it. So even in classical Greek, they were telling us, technology is not free. Technology has consequences. Yes, it has benefits, but it is never free of consequences. So Prometheus gave us fire. Fire defined who we are. I mean, if you look at, for example, compare a gorilla spent, I think, like half of his day just chewing food. So it has a huge job. We don't have to chew food because we can cook it using fire. But fire also kills people. And we just had the fires in California, in the West Coast. The whole West Coast has been burning. And every year it's getting worse and worse. We have climate change coming because of fire, essentially. So technology is not free. We cannot get rid of technology. Technology is who we are. The question is, how do we live with technology? So we launched at RISE a new initiative called Technology, Culture, and Society, where we want to study this interaction. We want to understand how technology impacts society and culture. And we want to understand how society should respond to such an impact. And it's an academic initiative. We have research scholarship, we do education, we do outreach. We got a bit derailed by COVID-19, but I think this is one of the most important issues now for humanity is how to deal with technology. And I want to finish by quoting BMW. So you may remember that BMW has a tagline, the ultimate driving machines. And now they have a problem because everybody's talking about autonomous vehicles. So they came up with this new motto, don't be driven by technology, drive it. And I think this is a wonderful motto for us as a society. Don't be driven by technology, drive it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Moshe, for a great talk. So we can have some discussion and questions. Again, to repeat, if you have questions, if you have a question, just flag it on the chat and I'll come to you for questions. I've been monitoring it. Katrina Ingram, you had that question. Do you want to unmute and ask the question, please?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much. That was a fantastic talk. I'm a recent graduate. I've been working in this area of AI ethics for the past 2 years now. And so I have two questions. One you partially answered already, but I'm wondering, is there any role for ethics in this process, or what do you see as the role for ethics in this process in terms of trying to enable trust and fix things? And then the second part of my question is, what do you see as the role of auditing AI systems by third parties?
Before we start, I request that everyone who asks the question show his or her face with the camera so I can read lips.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
I mean, I read your question in the chat, so you don't have to do it now, but please, everybody else.
Very good point. Thank you, Dan, for reminding us. So I think it's important to, so we teach this course in ethics at RISE, and the main purpose in teaching this course is to really, in my opinion, to teach the students social responsibility. That is to teach them that they go out to the world, they are responsible, they are very privileged, These are the people who go to work for Google and Facebook and these companies. They will make products. Some of them will start companies. For example, after we did the course for the first time, we did the informal poll among the students. We asked them, if you get an offer from Facebook, will you go work there? And 2/3 said yes. Say known to be a company it's a great company to work for. But one company said, 1/3 said no. And I asked students, does anyone wants to say why no? And the response was from this student was, I will have lots of options as a graduate from Rice University. Why should I take the ethically questionable one? And one thing that may force these companies to change their behavior is their employees are getting more and more unhappy. And you read it now, there are all kinds of things. People are resigning, they're leaving, people are getting unhappy inside Facebook, for example. And these companies, what do they have? What they have is their workforce. What they have is not the infrastructure. Infrastructure is replaceable. The workforce is very, very important. And if we, there are industry, we have to think about it. For example, nuclear energy in the United States has been going nowhere for many years. And one has been going nowhere. People think of nuclear as somehow radiation thing. Nobody think of nuclear as green. So people don't go to nuclear engineering. It's become not popular. And ultimately, it has an impact on the industry. And the students of today, I see when I was students today, they're much more, I would say, socially aware than students of even 5 years ago. It's a new generation of students. And I think it's important to teach them about social responsibility. That doesn't mean, it doesn't exempt us as a society also to tell this company, we cannot wait for the students to go there and to say, oh, Vardi told us what you're doing is unethical, let's not do this. If we as a society thinks that we don't like this, then it's up to us as a society to tell this corporation how to behave. We shouldn't expect corporation to regulate themselves, because I'm not good at regulating myself, and we can extrapolate from that. What was your other question? Remind me.
Yeah, it was about the role of auditing and sort of third-party verification, and do you have any thoughts on that?
So now that you have a company that does want to say, we want to behave ethically, that is, we want our product to adhere to some code of ethics, and we recognize that it will be in our interest to be audited by a third party. The same way that, for example, so right now it's voluntary. And they think that will give them a commercial advantage to have a seal of approval from some third party. But when it comes, for example, to accounting standards, we don't just say, we will give you a certificate of honest company if you want to, but you don't have to. No, we are requiring company audited by a third party. And so right now it's voluntary. I think it's a good thing. I think if companies are willing to do it, and partly we will have to see, I like the initiative. I'm kind of involved a little bit from the sideline. I'm supportive of this. We'll have to see how well it works out. At the end of the day, it will be, this is, for example, Google has announced some ethics board, but it's a mysterious, quiet ethics board. The real question would be, what is the power of this ethics board? If ethics board go and tell this company, no, you cannot do this. And somebody else says, wow, we're going to make gazillion dollars if we sell this product. What will they do? This is really ultimately where the tire meets the road. Will they avoid, what will win, ethics or profit making? And I would say, I don't know yet. We will have to wait and see how well it works out.
Thank you.
Okay, Dan Berry has typed the question, so I'm going to read it. So what do we do when government is unwilling to make laws to restrict corporate behavior on the grounds of inhibiting the economy?
I mean, this question you can ask more broadly. What do you do when government blah? And right now the answer is, all I can quote Churchill, right? Democracy is the worst form of government other than everything else. And if we didn't appreciate Churchill 4 years ago, we all appreciate Churchill now. We all see how imperfect democracy is. We all realize how fragile it is. Okay, I mean, And actually, you know, I mean, this issue, if we think democracy is being held by laws and constitutions, but democracy is really held, that's why the importance of ethics. This is why they said the law floats on a sea of ethics. Ultimately, democracy works on the honor system. You have to agree to follow the rules. But there are huge gaps. I mean, just to take it, for example, the United States now has been working for roughly since about 1800 on the supremacy of the Supreme Court. That's not written anywhere. The Constitution does not say the Supreme Court has the last word on constitutionality of laws. There was a famous case, okay? And Chief Justice Marshall wrote an opinion and it's been accepted. But there are in fact people that would tell you that historically, they don't think the framer have it in mind that one branch will have this kind of supremacy. One of my big worry would have been what happened if our new president said about the decision of the Supreme Court, I don't accept it. The Constitution doesn't say I have to follow it. So really democracy at the end, good governance at the end follows on norms and ethics. And what we're seeing now, for example, in the United States is gradually how this set of norms and ethics is declining. And the question is, you know, will we, what happens, you know, it's just not happened during Trump. What happened after Trump? And answer is, I don't know, I'm very worried. So how to create good governments is one of our central problems. And all I can do again is quote the US Constitution with the people of the United States of America in order to form a more perfect union. This is to me a brilliant sentence because it said there's no perfect union, there's no perfect form of governments, it's eternal quest. And we go up, we go down. Hopefully, the long arc of history, we will go up. But in the short term, I'm concerned. I don't have a magical answer to what do we do about right now about our failing political systems.
Moshe. Shai, you had a comment?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I mean, I agree with much of what you say, but I think that regulation and applying to politics is not going to give us a solution. It's more about education. I mean, if people feel bad about some event, then, you know, Facebook and Google quickly respond and say, we're not investing in this company because this company has a bad reputation. My ability to affect politicians is much weaker. And so I do have an effect on the big companies of technology, but it doesn't go through the government and regulations. The regulators are easily bribed. The regulators don't really understand what's happening. They have an incentive in having a positive public image. And through affecting, I mean, I have a voice in this public image, which is more effective than my voice through voting once in 4 years. And I think that the answer should be education rather than regulation. And what you're describing that you're doing at Rice is in the right direction.
So I don't think these things are exclusive. I don't think they're exclusive of each other. On certain areas, you can influence cooperation. On certain other areas, not so much. I'll give you, for example, take what's happening with privacy. So imagine that somebody would tell you, you know, I'll pay, you know, I want to take a picture, a nude of your picture in the nude, but I will only sell 1 pixel at a time. And you think, yeah, a nude picture, even my most private part, if you want to sell a pixel, go ahead, sell a pixel. We all understand, we know enough, we are sophisticated enough to understand that if you open enough pixels, eventually your picture in the nude is out there. You may say it's okay with me, but other people may not feel it's okay with them for the nude picture be out there. What happened is, for example, through many of these companies, we're selling 1 pixel at a time. You click on a like, you sold them a pixel, and you say, okay, they know that I like this. What does it? I like little dogs, okay? What we don't know, what happened when you do it in such a way, and in particular, my big worry is on political influence, okay? We are actually much less sophisticated in understanding ourselves than we think we are. And even though I think myself as I say, as a centrist politically, I have to think maybe Facebook is right when they say that I am that I'm actually extremely liberal because they have more data than I do. They have more awareness of all the data. They look at the picture. They can compare me to other people the way that I cannot. And that means that I'm open to influence. And all of us now are open to influence in a way that is invisible to us. So the idea that we could influence these companies, given that, you see, for example, there was a debate about police behavior. And one of the things people says, if they have webcams, let's make all the webcams public, for example, okay? So, but right now, this corporation, they operate as black boxes. We are open book, they are black boxes. And I think it's a very uneven competition, and that's why I think it is so difficult to influence them. So I think education is part of it, but I wouldn't be so cynical. I'm just, I guess, less cynical than you and less jaded than you. And even though right now I'm depressed, but I'm not hopeless about government.
Thank you. Next in line is Enamul Haq. You had a question?
Yeah, hello. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please turn the video on.
Turn on your, turn on your video, please.
Okay, it's working.
Okay.
Okay. So my question is about I have heard a few days ago one student who was admitted into Harvard, but from his Facebook account, the government agency or somehow it is found that he has written something which does not go with the policy, and he was right away he was sent back to his country. And the way you also talked about the biasness, it is not only associated with blacks or racism, it is also with religious and other perspective. So what's your say on that? Because government sometimes think that they also use this, they want to use them, right? Like a few days ago, Apple wanted to break one phone's password to get information about one people. The government approached Apple. Same way government probably using like Cambridge Analytica and all that. So what's your say on that?
So part of the problem with our data, and this is the problem that actually Tim Cook was talking about, that it's not just there is a data. What happened with this data? Who gets it? Who can get it? So, for example, there are all these people who would like to know that they are 5% Irish. So they go to answer, 23andMe and whatever, one of these things. Who can access the genetic data? Right. And this is completely unregulated, okay? Now, our relation with government is always, I mean, in some sense, being suspicious of government is right, because the social compact is that we give government exclusive right to violence, right? I cannot do anything to you by force, but government can. And we have agreed in our society to take violence, and only government can use violence against us. We've given government tremendous power, the only one that are legally allowed to use violence, okay? I can call you, I can do all kinds of things, tell you I'm unhappy with you. I cannot use force against you. Government can. So, and in fact, if you look at the framers, of course, they're coming from, the government for them was an oppressor. It was England, Royal England, so it was an oppressor. So part of the challenge is how to give government, and this is why it's always about a more perfect union, how to give government enough power to do good, but also to prevent them from doing bad. And what we are seeing now, for example, one of the things that we are reading about how immigration and custom enforcement have behaved, you must have read in the US borders, looks like we've given them too much power. And the same thing, we're worried about the data. What kind of data should we give the government? Given this government on one hand, I want my government to protect me from terrorism. But I don't want my government to use it as an excuse to act in a racist way, because it's possible again, the Constitution gives the executive power tremendous amount of power. And if the president makes a decision, it's very hard to overcome it unless you find real evidence that this is illegal. So this is very, very delicate balance. And I think after you know, I suspect in the aftermath of this presidency, we will see lots of political scientists and constitutional scholars debating what do we need to change in this contract, this compact that we have with the government. How do we frame it to find a better balance than we've had so far? But part of the question is especially since we are giving our data so freely to so many companies, and there are no rules about who can get this data, and the answer is private entities as well as public entities. If you give your DNA to someone to find out about your ancestry, the FBI can get it. There's nothing that says they cannot give it to the FBI, for example.
All right, 2 more, and then we'll be done. Thierry Delisle. Thierry?
Yes, you can hear me?
Yep, turn on your video, please.
I don't have a webcam, so there's just no input.
Okay.
I can.
I will
Okay.
repeat the question.
Okay.
I think the question is on the chat.
Yeah. So I've typed it, but I can rephrase it.
Okay, Dan, can you read it on the chat?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
So the question I had is when I finished my engineering degree, all of my friends who were in electrical or mechanical engineering had to be accredited by the order, because you can't really get a job without being an accredited engineer in Quebec and I think in other places in Canada. But almost no one requires that for CS. For computer science engineering, or ECE, I think it's called here. What do you think? Do you think we should start asking some form of accreditation or stuff like that, so that there is some third-party supervision of the technology?
I have to say I'm ambivalent about it. I'll tell you my ambivalence about it. And years ago, I would say 20 years ago, I wrote I was against it. Now I'm less against it than I was, but I still can't tell you that I'm for it. Partly, for example, this license, take the issue, it connects to the issue of licensing of engineer. So in certain professions, you have a concept of a solo practitioner. For example, if you're a civil engineer, you can be a solo practitioner. Somebody, if I want to do remodeling, when I did the remodeling, then I went to an architect. An architect, this was not here, but years ago, I have a house in Palo Alto and the remodeling. I went to an architect and he proposed some remodeling and he did the chart. And this had to go to an engineer that signed off on it to say that this is safe. And then with the signature of the engineer, we can go to the city and get a building permit. And this is a solo engineer that does it. Now, in certain, but you go, for example, in electrical engineering, okay? So there is somebody at the end, a licensed engineer has to sign on like an Intel design. But hundreds of engineers worked on it. But at the end, one licensed engineer would sign off on it. And somebody will have to look more closely and convince me that at the end, it really results in safer products, in better things because of that. There is accreditation of programs may force, for example, every program. I think every program does need to have ethics. But even ethics, it turns out there are different ways of teaching ethics. The standard way of engineering ethics, for example, can be summarized as, if you build a product, it should work as specified, okay? So if you build a bridge, the bridge should not collapse. But if you're building machine learning system, just to say it should work as specified, or you're building face recognition technology, it's very much more, the ethic is really how it is deployed, rather does it work properly, okay? And so I'm less convinced that that licensing and accreditation will be an effective tool ultimately to make sure that our profession does things in a more societally beneficial way. So I'm hedging here. It will require, I think, further investigation. It's a very good question to which I don't have a good answer yet.
Thanks.
The final question from Amelia Holcomb.
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. I was wondering if you have any resources for computer scientists and especially graduating students who are looking for positions with ethical companies. Or alternatively, how do we as computer scientists support the policymakers who are seeking to regulate big tech?
So very often, I'll rephrase your question. Very often I give such a talk and somebody said, okay, I'm about to graduate. Tell me what I should do. And I said, you have a lot of power with your finger and with your feet. What is the power with your feet? You decide where you're going to work for. So you're going to, I don't know that there is, I have not seen a list of ethical companies, but you're going to work for a company, do the research. Don't just look at the benefit. Is the regime, do they have sushi on premises? But look at what is they do. Do you think that this is good for the world or good for society or not? And again, one advantage of computer scientists today, you'll have lots of offers. We're in high demand. You'll be able to choose a company that you think, I like what they do better than some other companies. The other thing is, this is special true in the United States, what are the fingers? This is how you vote. You know, voting is a paradox because, in fact, economists call it the voting paradox. Because if you look at how much you get to benefit from voting, because your voice is just one voice among so many, and you look at the expenses you need to, right now they want us to drive somewhere, to risk our life to vote, okay? And at the end, your influence is epsilon. But of course, if all of us do this calculation, then this is a prisoner's dilemma. We all defect and society as a whole suffers. But we have a responsibility, I think, as computer professionals to vote our conscience, and we have to speak our conscience. One of the things that we should not do, you know, when I started, I give you an example. When I started I became interested in kind of technology society about a decade ago. And the first topic that I started talking about is automation and labor, where the standard mantra has been before that, oh, technology destroys some jobs, but it creates new jobs, so it is okay. But it's when you look at the data, you see, no, it's actually not so much okay. It creates good job for us, and it destroys jobs for working class people. So I don't think it's quite okay. And I gave this talk, and I swear somebody came to me after I held my talk, and he said, don't give such talks. It's going to be bad for funding. And to me, this is morally bankrupt, right? We shouldn't just keep doing bad things just because we'll continue to get funding to keep doing the same things. So I think we have a responsibility to walk to the right job, vote the right way, and speak the right way. We should be aware that our technology has huge benefits, and I can talk about these benefits. But also it does not come without risk, and we should be the first one to admit this adverse side effects, rather than wait for other people to speak about them.
Thank you, Moshe.
Oh, sorry. Do you mind
Go
if
ahead.
I follow up really quickly about that on the policy side? I think one thing I see, though, is that computer scientists are often talking to computer science communities. And I see policymakers writing about policy or, you know, interviewing computer scientists perhaps before Congress, but not really necessarily having the conversations with computer scientists. And I often see in the news big tech companies making claims like, oh, we couldn't possibly do this. It would be, you know, technologically impractical to do this ethical thing. And I think to myself, that doesn't sound technologically impractical at all. It sounds like you could persuade a senator that it's technologically impractical, but you couldn't persuade a computer scientist that it is. So how do we open up that communication, and how do we work with policymakers to talk to them about what can be done and how computer science can improve and how they can best regulate it?
So several answers to that. One is education. So a few years ago, we started to raise a course that since then, unfortunately, you need to find the right people to teach it. But the course was Technology, Society, and Public Policy. And the course was co-taught by a PhD students from computer science and someone who was actually a public policy, was his scholarly area. He had a PhD in public, he had a postdoc, but he was a PhD in public policy. And they team taught. And every week, the course was 2 lectures. Third lecture was technology. Let's expand the technology. And the second lecture was, let's discuss policy aspect related to this technology. And the course brought together, it was open course, both computer scientists, but also students from other areas. So you had to expand technology to the non-computer scientists, but the computer scientists also got to hear about the policy aspect, which they have never thought before. So this is, so partly we need to start educating people, both computer scientists and non-computer scientists from early on. There are actually, you know, the other thing that I was very, when we taught the course on technology, culture, technologies, ethic, computing, ethic, and society at Rice, one student came to me at the end and decided, because of the course, I'm pivoting my career. I was going to just to go and do a master's degree in computing and then go into the industry. Now she decided to do a master's degree in tech policy. There are now some programs in tech policy. And she decided to go and get a master's degree in tech policy. And she said, I may end up working for a company doing policy or for a government doing policy, but my computer science background will prove very valuable to do tech policy. And there are also various opportunities for people to do like a policy fellowship. There are various opportunities through different agencies. For example, I know that the American Social Advancement of Science has this concept, taking scientists and assigning them as experts to various government agencies, take a sabbatical and spend some time they're doing it. So there are various ways in which we can try to build the bridge. What we need is to build the bridge. I completely agree with you. Build the bridge between technology and policy. And there are various ways. I say it starts from education, but also individually, there are ways to try to build these bridges.
All right. With that, I think Moshe has other engagements this afternoon with different groups in the school, so we should end it. Thank you, Moshe, for a very enlightening and thought-provoking talk. I hope we will be able to repeat it sometime in the future in person.
You owe me dinner. I told you that. You owe me dinner.
Yeah, I owe you dinner and more. But thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining. Let's thank Moshe one more time.